did you first grow curious about the paranormal? Dare you dig deeper? You are listening to House of Asher.
Yes, you are listening to the House of Asher. I'm your host, Steve Asher, and we're up on episode 53. And one of the things I want to mention before we get into this with our very special guest is everything that, I guess, I don't know, I think you get to a certain age, you get somewhat nostalgic. And sometimes, it's really great looking at stuff that happened to stuff that you really loved from your childhood and teenage years, but sometimes those are, well, in the best possible sense of the word, kind of dated and stuff. But the things that I'm talking about now is extremely current, and there's actually new stuff coming out about what I want to talk to you about today all the time. The subject that we're talking about today is the crystal skulls, and that's just literally the peak of it. There's so much involved with vibrations and frequencies and the spiritual quotient of all this, and I'm very much a layman on this, whereas most of my paranormal education, as it were, was more rooted in ghostly phenomenon and things of that nature. But our guest, who I would like to introduce, has been doing this for quite a while. I think it's 30 plus years, and I've been following this guy on like a lot of the shows that I grew up on and really cut my teeth on, that really got me into wanting to do this sort of stuff. And I have Mr. Joshua Shapiro. Sir, thank you for being a guest on the show.
Oh, my pleasure, Steve. Thank you for having me.
Hey, I thank you again. And, it's every so often I'll have some guests on here, and it's probably not professional to say I'm a little intimidated, but you are such an expert in this field. And, there's everyone, I don't want to say everyone, but there's a lot of people that's like, oh, our team's this and that, and they've got maybe 5 or 6 years of experience, or they've got maybe 10 years experience, but it's in a very specialized thing. But, you've been really all over learning about this, and it seems like it's what I want to know initially is, when you come to this, because I think one of the first skulls that you had exposure to physically was the one in California, right? Is this the Ami skull, or am I pronouncing that wrong?
No, Ami or Ami, that was the name of it. Made out of amethyst quartz crystal. That's the one I saw in Southern California.
Well, something that I'm not sure if I heard it or read it, because like I said, I've been bouncing around off and on for several years about the subject, is that, and the reason I say this, and again, it resonates with me, pardon the pun, it resonates with me, being that I've worked in corrections, I've learned to trust that little internal tremor, that gut thing, good or bad, and you can kind of size people up, size encounters up, and size situations up. And if I'm not mistaken, that was really the first time that you had any sort of, I guess the best term for it was psychic resonance with one of these objects, was when you held that particular skull. Was that correct?
I'm sure back then, we're talking about 1983, when that was the first time I saw that skull. I was just starting to dabble and get involved in things which today we call of the paranormal. But I'm sure I had some other experiences, but it was really when I was in the presence of this, and we really, I did get to touch it, but it wasn't like where you could just hold it for a long period of time like we do with the crystal skulls that we have, or other crystal skulls I've seen. It was more even just being in the presence of it, the, let's say, higher vibrational frequencies that were emanated from it. I was sensitive enough to this crystal skull that it really impacted me. First, just even looking at a picture of it, and then being in the presence of it. So, but I'm sure, excuse me, that having this opportunity to actually be in the presence, I think it changed me. It it helped me to become more receptive to these types of frequencies and energies, especially what these crystal skulls can hold, because I believe they record everything that happens around them. And I think this particular one that I had a chance to see back in '83 is quite old. Should point out that even though I saw it in California at that time, we're not really sure where it is because it was actually purchased. Trying to remember when that happened. I guess it was around 2008 or something like that. And we don't know who has it, and whoever purchased the skull has never come out publicly to say, they're the guardian. They decided to buy it as a private collector.
Well, let me ask you something on that sort of makes me wonder, because like I said, everyone could have, people could have private, collections for very positive reasons, or they could have for very nefarious reasons, or just sort of pulling them out of the world, to kind of contain whatever they feel its power is in that. Have you found that? Because understand, when I first come on to the scene and being exposed to that, as I mentioned, with stuff like In Search Of and some of the early paranormal shows, that I had always thought that there were like 12 or so primary, or I'm slipping on the words, almost like the starter skulls, like the ones that were used to help power future skulls that were crafted. Are there like primal or prime skulls out there? Or
well, this is one of the theories. I mean, the problem with crystal skulls is because they're made out of quartz crystal, which is an inorganic substance. There really isn't any scientific way that we have that you can date. Like they have carbon-14 dating for artifacts they find in different ruins, which is usually based on living ruins that they have, things that were alive, like if they have bones from a person that was alive with a civilization, they can date the decay of carbon in it. But quartz crystal is inorganic, so there's no way to really know as far as how old or what age, etc. But purportedly coming through some of the indigenous cultures, and this seems to be like the earliest people who may have had contact with crystal skulls that we're aware of today, that have descendants that are still alive. They have talked about the possibility of being an original set of 12 or 13 crystal skulls. Now, the challenge with this is that there's no way to prove whether this is true or not, because since, let's say, the early part of the 20th century, when there started to be a great interest around the crystal skulls from an archaeological or scientific perspective, there's been quite a few different crystal skulls that have been discovered all over the world. And at the point of where we're at right now in 2018, there's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of crystal skulls that have been found, especially around, let's say, these older cities, older ruins like in Mexico and Central America. So as far as if this theory is correct about 12 or 13 master skulls, of which, let's say, other skulls were inspired, etc., there's no way to actually prove it. It's idea. It's something that people, and I would include myself in that group, resonate with the idea or the concept of it, but there's no way to actually prove it's true or not. And I'm not even sure if the belief in this concept is important or not, because we have all of these crystal skulls that have been discovered or uncovered, and I'm not talking about the ones that are made by modern carvers. I'm talking about ones that have been found or are connected with indigenous people or maybe their ancestors passed the skulls from one person to another over thousands of years.
Well, can I ask you something? I'm sorry to interject. If I don't ask you this, I'll forget it. Like the Mitchell Hedgen skull, was that one of? Would you consider that one of the prime skulls? I mean, I'm not for sure exactly where that one's at. I know they have some in the British Museum, but I don't know if that is from another grouping of the skulls, of different types of skulls. Because I think they had one in there around 2009.
The British Museum still has a crystal skull, which is on display, and it's been there since 1890 1898, I believe, is when it was first put on public display, and they've taken it off at time. The Mitchell Hedgen skull, again, is probably the most famous crystal skull in the world, because it's been around for a very long time. The original guardians of the skulls, the Mitchell Hedges family, which was from England, they claimed that they discovered the skull in British Honduras, which is now called Belize, in 1923. So it means, it's going on almost 100 years since its discovery, and also because it is an almost exact duplicate of a human bone skull. Many of the crystal skulls that have been found near the ruins are stylized skulls. They're not very elaborate as far as compared to human bone skull. So, and then, of course, the Mitchell Hedgen skull, again, just like we were talking about with the crystal skull of me that I saw back in 1983, has a very powerful energy surrounding it. In 2016, we actually worked with the current guardian of the skull, whose name is Bill Holman. He was a very good friend of Anna Mitchell Hedges before she passed away at 100 years of age, which would be, in 2000, I guess, or she was 17 in 1917, so around 2001, she passed away, and he was supporting and helping her, so he inherited the crystal skull, and he's continuing periodically to travel to different places to share it with people. And I recall when we had the skull in 2016, basically we were helping him, allowing him to have private sessions so people could actually sit with it. Again, they weren't allowed to hold the skull or touch it, but they could sit in the presence. They could put their personal crystals around it, and I remember watching many people come out of those sessions, and it was like, they were totally amazed by how much energy there was and what effect it had upon them. Some people might have received a healing. They had their creative gifts brought forward. Their spiritual gifts were brought forward. So it's very powerful. Now, as far as whether that's one of the original skulls, some people believe it is, because it seems to be one of the most advanced, powerful skulls that exists that people have experienced. But my sensing of it is, and again, I can't prove this, I think it comes more from what I would call a soul memory, is that although it's a very sophisticated skull, I don't think it's one of the original set. I think it was a duplicate that was created to protect one of the original sets, probably back in Atlantis. And, being that it was created that far back, then it would have extreme power. But again, when it comes down to trying to say, whether one was one of the original skulls or not, I don't think it's that important for right now, because I think what it is we just need to study all the skulls, the ones that are made by modern carvers, the ones that are coming out of ancient civilizations, and kind of study, what effect they have on people, or what legends are connected to them. But the bottom line for me with all of the crystal skulls is that, and this is the message that a telepathic message I received during the time I had a chance to be around the energy of me, the first skull that I met, is that, they were created whenever that was, whether it's 100 years ago or 1,000, 10,000, 100,000 years ago, to be a tool to help humanity to create peace on this planet, and also to help us to remember more of our true spiritual essence, who we are as divine children of God. So that's basically the way that I see the crystal skulls, and why I think so many of them have started to kind of come out and resurface, is because right now, the period of time that we're going through, we've had many advances within, say, the last 10, 20 years, technologically. A lot of information is coming out historically about who humanity is and what our relationship is to the universe, but we still have a lot of challenges amongst ourselves, getting along with each other and trying to live together harmoniously and peacefully. We still have wars and conflicts, and we still have the rich, we still have the poor, so there's still quite a way for humanity to go. So I think the crystal skulls, at least this is what I felt when I was having my contact with me, were resurfacing to help us, because I believe there's a time in the not too distant future where we will see a planet of total peace and harmony, and I think the skulls are kind of returning to assist us with that. And as more and more people have an opportunity to actually work with the energy surrounding the skulls, that this is part of what their work is. And I think that the possibility exists, at least this is what many people feel, that there was an original set of skulls maybe very far in the past. We're talking about back during the time of Atlantis, perhaps, which could put it thousands of years, that they were scattered, and perhaps there will come a point in time where these original skulls will come together. But whether the Mitchell Hedges or any of the skulls that we know are one of these skulls, for my divine life partner Katrina and I don't think that humanity's ready to deal with that set, because the energy connected to them is more powerful than we can deal with. So these other skulls have been coming out to help to prepare us that maybe at some point in the future, if there is an original set, that eventually humanity will be ready for it and can deal with it in a responsible way. The problem has been in the past that, if we look at the Mayans or the Aztecs, they've had part of their civilization where they were very advanced and very spiritual and lived very peacefully, but they've also had times that were very violent. And there's rumors that they were using the skulls in, let's say, some of their ceremonies, which were to sacrifice people or something like that, which has nothing to do with crystal skulls, but they were including it in such things. So that's kind of the way that I perceive this concept of an original set, and if it does exist, why perhaps we haven't seen it. But certainly, if there's any crystal skull that would be an example of what might be possible with such an advanced set of skulls, the Mitchell Hedges would probably come the closest to it.
Okay. Well, let me ask you something real quick. And there's a couple points that you'd made that I was going to kind of interject, but I did not want to stop your flow, because I love listening to you tell me about this stuff. First of all, we were talking about, people talk about, an energy or a resonance or this, and I think people overuse these words and it loses its real power. I know, but in the situation with these particular formations, it does seem like that, there really is sort of an awe-inspiring vibration that comes from being, especially if you have multiple, and I don't know if it has something to do with maybe a certain configuration or whatnot, but does it have to do partially with the structure or the material that it's used? Is it in necessarily the shaping or the working of it? Because I know very much like, as like pyramids, supposedly have power. Especially was it like a third or a quarter of the way in from its peak?
Mm-hmm.
And I wonder if that, and again, I'm very much a sort of a novice on this, so I lean to your tutorage. I wonder if that is sort of part of that, or if that is more of just that maybe that recenters are sort of funnels the energies that are already there, but sort of in sort of almost a pinpoint where we really notice them. I mean, because I'm sure we're awash in energy constantly, but we don't register it.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I think from an energy point of view, there's a lot of energies that are around us all the time. And it depends upon a person's sensitivity to those energies. Obviously, people who, when they were born, were sensitive to things. And this would also include ghosts as well, which you mentioned in the introduction. There are people who can talk to and see ghosts or see spirits. They have this gift. And it's because through my study of the paranormal, I know that there is multiple frequencies of energy that are constantly around us, but it depends upon our sensitivity. So if a person is completely focused, let's say in the physical reality, they're using their physical senses, it's kind of like a radio set. When you have a radio, you're able to tune into different channels and frequencies. But to illustrate this point, there was a friend that we know in New York State that we met when we went to New York City, who has her own crystal skull. She's not very active. I don't hear about her very often. But her father worked for like NBC, CBS, when television didn't exist, just radio. And one of the things that was happening is they were recording voices of people speaking, but these were not people who were broadcasting over a radio station. They were just voices that were connected to a specific radio frequency. And they decided that those frequencies would be banned because they were probably the voices of people either in another dimension, a parallel dimension, or possibly could be coming from the dimension that we go when we pass on, which some people call the other side or dreamland or whatever. So it's the same thing. These same principles also work with the crystal skulls. Number one, the idea of a crystal skull was the idea that the first skulls that came out were made out of quartz crystal. And quartz crystal, for me, is a transmitter and receiver of different frequencies of energy. So that a crystal skull could have an impact or an effect on a person from an energetic point of view is inherent with the quality of what quartz crystal does. All of our modern electronics today are made from quartz crystal, and the primary reason for that is because the quartz has the ability to handle the electrical current that's sent through it, and they're able to, of course, work with on or off, which is the binary idea of the modern computer. That's how they work. But now we're coming up with a new type of computer, which I have no idea what the chip is made from, called a quantum computer using a qubit, which has the ability to be in multiple states at the same time. So in other words, it could be on and off at the same time, and it's able to work with that. But anyway, quartz crystal was the first material which the crystal skulls were discovered. That's why people call them crystal skulls, although today modern carvers are making skulls from every type of gemstone you can imagine, and they're just calling them all crystal skulls. But my personal belief is that the original set that you asked about, the ones that were probably used long ago, they recognized the ability of quartz to modulate these different frequencies, and this was primarily the reason why the first crystal skulls most likely were made out of quartz crystal. One other thing that has come up for me, but again, this is kind of a inner experience, so there's no way I can prove this, is that I think the crystal skulls long ago were like communication devices, just like, we have our telephone, and now we have the computer. We're using Skype over the computer, gives us the ability to actually see each other and hear each other. I think the crystal skulls were also used as a kind of communication device as well. And because of that, I think that when our technology gets farther along, there may come a day where we'll be able to actually get a communication that's been encoded inside of a crystal skull using the modern equipment that we have for today.
Okay. Well, I was going to ask you something real quick, just because I don't want to forget this. You had mentioned the Lantean connection, and I had two questions, and you can answer them whatever way you want to go with it. One, you had mentioned they were, obviously they were very advanced. The area I'm in, Kentucky, the seer Edgar Casey, wasn't born and raised maybe 30 miles from here. We actually have a Casey feed mill truck that comes through here all the time, back and forth between Hopkinsville, Kentucky, and I'm in Princeton, Kentucky. So it's sort of an interesting point, and it made me think of something. Two things. I know, obviously, you said they were very advanced, but also possibly, may have in some which way led to their own destruction. I had heard a story, and of course, this could be conspiracy theory or speculation, that because you were talking about people collecting certain items, and it sort of takes me back to like Hitler, the whole belief that they thought he was trying to get the Spear of Destiny and some crystal skulls and the Ark of the Covenant and all that sort of thing. Have you have any information on that? If that was just Hollywood, if there was any sort of truth to that? Which, I mean, I knew that some of his guys, over the SS that were very much into the occult, into the darker element of it, were in search of, pardon the pun, to look out these type of things that they could try to either channel through or contact things through or use as energy weapons. Do you have any information on that you might want to share?
Well, I can't speak directly to, like what Hitler was doing. I can tell you that the co-author of my first book, Journeys of the Crystal Skulls Revealed, F.R. Nick Nasserino, he knew about several other crystal skulls, which I've never seen, which he talked about when we were together, when we were working together. And he mentioned that he believed that the Vatican may have a crystal skull like in its basement hidden away that Hitler possibly had. Because like you said, I've heard the same rumors that they were looking to collect all these power objects, and for some civilizations, obviously, a crystal skull would be considered a tremendous power object. So that's the only thing that I would know about it, but I am aware that, and this doesn't just have to do with the Nazis, this is with existing governments now, that they have come across ancient sites, including in Antarctica, and that they have found very advanced objects and technology, which they obviously they wanted to use for their own purposes. And obviously the crystal skulls would probably be one such item, because it's very interesting that you virtually hear nothing connected to crystal skulls coming out of like archaeologists or scientists. So this could represent for me the possibility that it had to do with artifacts that they are discovering, which are very important, that they didn't want people to be aware of or to know about. So definitely crystal skulls could be connected to this. But again, for me, I've always seen the crystal skulls as a tool that's coming back to help humanity to understand more about our true essence, our spiritual nature, to get us in touch with sacred knowledge and information, which I think civilizations in the past have had. There is another object that we could equate the crystal skull to, which definitely seems to be connected to Atlantis, which would be Dr. Brown's crystal ball, which I actually saw and held in my hand one time about 10 years ago. When Dr. Brown passed away, somehow there was this other gentleman who got a hold of this ball, and occasionally he would take it and share it with different people and things like that. So he took it to a spiritual center in Florida, in the Florida Keys. And at that time, Katrina and I, we were living in Atlanta, and I heard about it. So we actually drove down there. Took, I don't know, about 8 or 9 hour drive to get there from Atlanta. And what I can tell you about the Atlantean crystal ball is it definitely appeared to be made out of quartz crystal. According to Dr. Brown, when he was working with Jacques Cousteau, that he went to this underwater pyramid. There was some kind of storm, I guess, by Bermuda, and it revealed what was on the bottom of the ocean, and he found this very large pyramid that he was able to enter. And as a result of that, he went inside, and that's where he found this ball. So what I can tell you is the ball definitely had an energy like the crystal skulls, but the difference for me in experiencing this Atlantean crystal ball is it seemed to be more as if someone had programmed it, like, you know, how we work with a computer. You interact with the Windows operating system or the Mac operating system, and a human being or a group of human beings set this up so that you can have the interaction. That's what it felt more like, whereas with Crystal Skull, like the Mitchell Hedges, which I also think could have been in Atlantis, that feels more like I'm dealing with a living consciousness or intelligence. And the same is also true even working with the modern skulls today. Seems like there's some kind of living consciousness or spirit that sees the skull as a vessel or a means by which it can have contact with us, subtle contact with us. So if you talk to a lot of people who have crystal skulls, they'll talk about them as if they're alive. They're like a person that they're having an interaction with or communication with in some way. So, but I think that the reason for this is because many of the skulls are made from quartz crystal, and this allows a living consciousness that could be around us in a different dimension to work through the crystal and to kind of animate it like it's alive. So this would be, just some different thoughts and ideas related to, crystal skull being made out of quartz, how it might be utilized with the skulls in order to, kind of bring them to life, to have this tremendous energy coming out of them, to change a lot of people. Like every time people hear about the Mitchell Hedges skull, if they have some knowledge of crystal skulls and they have a chance to see it, it's like this is one of the most special experiences they want to have in their life, just to see what is it like, what's the energy like, what effect could it have on me, how might it be a catalyst for positive change in my life.
Well, and that's very telling of the positivity from these skulls. Something that we were talking about a minute ago as well, the whole interaction with not just the paranormal, but with kind of like the Hollow Earth, which of course makes me think of, like UFOs and things like that, which then of course makes me think of, because I'm the king of no segues, is thinking about things like star children and their interactions with this. Do you think that, and if you want, you can maybe expand a little bit more on what star children are, but do you feel that due to the fact that we have been dealing at this point for several years now with truly exploring and trying to understand what the skulls, for a better lack of the word, are trying to tell us or trying to teach us that we are slowly going up that vibrational plane to where we will have more star children here, and slowly do that shift into, like type 1, type 0, type whatever civilizations, and onto a higher vibrational plane. I mean, again, I'm very much a layman on this, and this is very much your world I'm talking about. But how do you feel that interacts with the phenomenon of star children?
Well, first we'll define star children or star people for your listeners, so we're on the same page, because I know what you're asking me. I very much I don't believe, I know that this is true, that there are in human bodies souls who actually originate from other planets in the universe, and they may not be coming from the same, let's say, dimensional existence as we're in. They could be from parallel universes, etc. Because from the highest perspective, as I see things, is that our soul, which is an energy being, decides to incarnate into human form, or into a physical form, let's say, because if we say human, it means to the earth, and a physical form could be non-human, could be humanoid, with head, 2 arms, 2 legs, but not look like how we look like. So this idea that an extraterrestrial soul would incarnate into a physical body called a star person or star child is very popular. It actually is known among some of the Native American tribes. They talk about the star people also, but basically this concept came up when Brad Steiger was hypnotically regressing certain people who were having problems kind of just living on the earth, a regular 9 to 5 existence, and they start talking about when they're in an altered state of consciousness through hypnotic regression, that the earth is not their home, that they actually have another planet that they come from, and that they basically came here to help humanity to create a more peaceful world. So this is the essence of star people or star children you're talking about. Now, what I can tell you is we do private sessions with the crystal skulls for basically 2 reasons. Number one, so more people have an opportunity to directly experience the energy privately. So in our sessions, they can hold, one of our skulls, and we have between 25 and 30 different skulls. We have a couple that could be quite old. Most of them are relatively new, but it doesn't matter, because through working with us, through the many meditations we do for world peace, visiting of sacred sites, we're doing world peace meditations, all the different activities that we've done, all the sessions we've done, have literally awakened the crystal skulls we have. And so what I am able to do, because I'm sensitive to energy, is I can kind of feel when we have in the presence of our session a star person. You can tell by the energy coming out of their eyes, that's how I know, or just what I feel, or also generally around the star people are also in spirit form, let's say, or in a higher vibrational form, are beings, extraterrestrial beings around them that are members from their home where they come from. And the agreement is okay, I'll go down to the earth, which to them is probably a crazy house, and but you guys will be around to protect me, let's say from serious problems. Like if something disastrous was going to come up, then they have a little bit of protection and help from members of their family. So your statement is actually quite correct. I would say 60 or 70% of the people that we see in our sessions or who come to our lecture generally are star people. And I think they're drawn to the crystal skulls because they resonate the higher frequencies of energies that they're accustomed to coming from their true home, their planet, or wherever it is they come. There's something about that frequency of energy that they resonate with, and they like to be around the skulls, or the skulls are helping them to deal with being here on the earth. And kind of the hardest part for the star person is how to integrate into our reality, because they're not accustomed to the idea of one person intentionally harming another, or people intentionally destroying the environment that we live on the planet. These are unthinkable things from where they come from. So they like to be around objects that hold the higher frequencies of energies that they're accustomed to, that actually they can get a healing, let's say, if they've been had difficulty dealing with some of the crazy things that human beings do on our planet.
Okay. Well, let me ask you one more thing. It's funny that you were mentioning the healing aspects and the, trying to protect, the world from going further down into a darker path. People like, I actually had a show not long ago talking about a thing called the Integratron. I'm not sure if you're familiar with it. It's from around Joshua Tree, where a guy named George Van Tassel thought he was in contact with certain spiritual beings from elsewhere, who were helping him to create an area of peace and light, in a place to basically regenerate the energy in your body. And then also I think of guys like Tesla, and I think of a lot of higher minded people that just never quite seemed of this world. And sometimes their lives went okay, and then sometimes it didn't, because just like, look at Mr. Tesla, wanted to give everyone free energy, and it seems like they kind of destroyed them for it. It seems like as bright as this can be, as the situation can be, and your intentions are, and sorry, I'm stumbling on this. I'm trying to word this right so it doesn't come off sounding facetious or pandering. There is an element of danger there. I mean, there is, because there are certain power structures there, and I'm not trying to be a conspiracy theorist, but there's obviously people that don't want things to change, and there are certain people who like it the way it is. They like that the war is going on. They like that tug of war. And if people ever really get it together and go above the fear and go above this and that, and I sound like I'm preaching, I apologize, but they supersede that lower vibration, they're not really going to need that power structure, or maybe the religious structure or whatever. Do you think that's ultimately where it's going to go? And do you ever feel, if you don't have to answer it if you don't want to, do you ever feel sometimes that things get dicey? I mean, have you ever been approached by people that were kind of like, well, I think you're going a little too far this way, maybe you need to cool it or whatever? I mean, have you ever had that kind of interaction from any governmental people?
I personally have not, and it's because I think that I am what I would call as a realist. Is I understand that we have a very diverse range of energies on the planet, as well as philosophies and ways of looking at life. And from a perspective of creator, everything has its place. I mean, we can look at this planet and we can say, well, there's a lot of things that could be different, could be better, and so on. But from the perspective of the growth of the soul, I think before all of us were born, we knew what we were coming into when we came to the earth, that it was going to be what I would call a difficult classroom. And one of the things is that everything has its purpose. Everything is in a divine way of teaching people lessons. We have the choice, we have the free will, if we want to learn our lessons in a difficult way or an easy way. And so just like other people, there are certain aspects of, say, the physical world, even for myself, that have been challenging. If you talk to Katrina, my partner, she'll tell you I always have challenges with finances. It goes up, it goes down. I never seem to be able to have enough or extra to be able to do, let's say, some of the bigger projects I'd like to be able to do. But then again, if I look back, since I decided to devote myself, to helping people to understand about crystal skulls or UFOs, the paranormal or Bitcoins is another thing that I'm working on now to help people with. There always seems to be exactly what's needed to be able to continue. So, I don't think personally that I'm seen as a threat. I don't have any information that I share or I talk about that the forces that be don't want it to be known. I mean, it's pretty much they recognize they can't stop the flow of information. When the internet was developed, which I think was inspired spiritually to do this, then it basically broke down a lot of barriers. So let's say the forces that be, they're not going to say what's correct or what's not. They're not going to admit that they're having contact with galactic beings or people that live in the hollow earth, or that they have some of the advanced technologies that we see in our movies, time traveling, teleportation, their own spacecraft. It's just they're not going to admit to this, but each person has to decide for themselves, what they believe, what they don't believe. And I think we're already past the point where a lot of things that have been denied for a long time, I don't think they really care anymore, because there's so much evidence and so many phenomena that are happening around it that, people are kind of just waking up. Now, the Integratron, it's interesting you brought it up, because I did actually have an opportunity to visit and sleep in it one time.
Really?
When I lived in California. I didn't really feel like it had, this strong energy. This was one of the things that was debated about it, whether I'm positive that he did get it from a galactic source, but whether it was actually active or not, I don't know. Now, I do know Joshua Tree, California, where they had, these UFO conferences out there by this gigantic boulder. Definitely there's very powerful energies in that region, and I'm sure that many of these early UFO contactees, like George Hunt Williamson, was one of the people contemporary of Van Tassel, also had a lot of experiences, and I am a very big believer in what he talked about, and also the group that he talked about called the Galactic Wanderers. That's what I feel from a soul perspective that I have the affinity with, which are, kind of like star people going from planet to planet, helping to lift it into the light, bring peace and harmony, then go on to the next planet. So since I read his books back in the early 80s, I always felt a very strong connection to that, how he described it. So, yeah, so I believe that all of these things are definitely coming out, because this is the direction our planet's going. I mean, how long can you ignore real things that are happening? I mean, now that we have these little video cameras called mobile phones, cell phones, that are recording, if you go on YouTube, the things that I've seen that people have recorded that's happening in the sky and, in different parts of the world, we're on the ebb of major transformation for the planet. And the crystal skulls coming out, to me, has always been a sign of these miraculous things that, some people say science fiction or fantasy. I once received a message from Spirit, so I don't know who gave this, but it made perfect sense, and I actually put it out on Facebook, and a lot of people resonated with this. And it's this idea that there is nothing that we can imagine unless it exists somewhere already. So in other words, everything that we can imagine already exists somewhere. There's nothing new that's coming out. So I think what it is now is that a lot of things that existed, let's say, during the time of Atlantis, or exist in other planets, or advanced technology of other races who are around us, watching us, seeing what we're doing, that we don't destroy ourselves. I think primarily that's their main concern. That everything that we can imagine, has existed somewhere already, and we're just, bringing it back here. So, any story that you listen to, or, some of the subjects that you mentioned, these are all real things that exist. And, this is why I think it's a very exciting time to be alive right now, as this is coming out. But the most important thing besides how the crystal skulls might help us is the advanced people that live on the earth, which is their home, whether they're living inside the planet, like in the interior, or what we call the hollow earth, which is, the opposite side of the surface, the inner surface. Eventually we're going to have a direct contact, and the tremendous knowledge and information and technology and understanding of the universe that they're going to bring forward to all people that live on this planet is very exciting. And I've actually met this man, Colonel Woodard, I believe is his last name, who definitely claims that he was born on inside the hollow earth, and was brought out and has been sharing a lot of information and insight about that. And then you also have like descendants of Lemuria, the city called Telos under Mount Shasta. I haven't met someone in the physical, but I've had telepathic contact. Seems to be somebody that lives there that seems to know me from a soul level, like past lives, like I was a brother of his or something. So every time I go there, I always sense this telepathic connection with this brother there. So a lot of things are getting ready to really come forward, and that's why we have all these stories in science fiction and our movies and everything. It's showing us real things. And actually, I'm also remembering another guardian I met. I'm not going to say his name, but he used to work for the military. He was protecting presidents when he was younger, and he also had a chance to see what they knew about UFO stuff. His comment to me was, everything that you see in the movies and on the TV series, all of that stuff already exists, and it's even far greater than what you're seeing through these shows.
So it's almost like they're slowly spoon feeding us to prepare us for it. Let me ask you one thing before we get too deep into the last few minutes of the show.
Right.
Where can people contact you? Where can people get your books? And I want to talk about this new book that you've got going on. Do you have any of your webpage information available real quick?
Right. The best place for people to find out related to the crystal skulls and the books that we have with the crystal skulls is our main website, which is at CSE, which is Crystal Skull Explorer. So it's like CSE.crystalskullexplorers.com. So again, that's CSE.crystalskullexplorers.com. We have like a shop menu on the website. That's where all the books are. The one that I just released, I re-released it. I updated it and I revised it. It's part of our travelogue series of books. We have 2 books where they focus on our travels in the world and what we found out about crystal skulls. So this one is called Journeys of the Crystal Skull Explorers, travelogue number 2, Search for the Blue Skull in Peru. So it involves 3 trips I took between 1997 and 2002 to go to the northern part of Peru, high up in the Andes Mountains. There was this location called the Laguna Negra, which in English is the Black Lagoon, but it's a very sacred lagoon high up in the Andes Mountains. I don't know, probably 12,000 feet, 13,000 feet up, where the local shamans take people and they do kind of like a healing and cleansing on them. I was literally guided to find this place. I mean, I was kind of like looking at different ancient sites, ancient civilizations, pre-Inca civilizations are up in the northern part of Peru. So, we were checking in, talking to archaeologists. Have you ever found a crystal skull? No, we don't know what you're talking about. We've never seen anything. But then we were guided to go to this sacred spot up in the mountains, and I started having visions related to a totally sky blue, transparent crystal skull, similar to the Mitchell Hedges. In my vision, I saw it had like two separate pieces, like the Mitchell Hedges skull, lower jaw, top part, and was actually I received the first time I went up into this area, I started receiving like this history after I did a meditation. I just had to keep writing, and I just had these thoughts. And so what I did in the 3 trips is I was able to bring like a little tiny computer with me, because the problem is when you go into Peru, it's a very high vibrational place. You're not going to remember hardly anything that you experienced there, because you're in like almost in an altered state. So fortunately, every day I wrote down these notes about my experiences on all 3 trips, and I also had different people who traveled with me. So I won't say more than that because I don't want to spoil it, but the new edition of this book was just released yesterday, actually. It's now available. So now I have to do what most authors do. I have to start getting the word out about it and let people know that this new book is available. I added like 80 or 90 pages to the original book, which came out in 2013. And I'm going to work on having an ebook version, a printed version, and then apparently they have 2 different versions of Kindle books now. So hopefully I will have that available as well. So whatever format people want. But the other reason I updated this book is because in the earlier part of this year, we also came out with another book, which again, it's on that shop page if people go to the website, a paranormal novel, and the blue skull shows up in that novel. So this was part of the reason why I was inspired to update the book, because I thought if people read the novel, they're going to come back and say, hey, Joshua, this blue skull that you introduced in your novel, does it really exist? Oh, yes, I've had a lot of contact with it. You should read the other book. So it's kind of like the novel and this new version of this book about the blue skull work together. But if people go to our website, they'll see several other books that we've done with crystal skulls. And then I've also made arrangement with like other authors. Like we have a book on Sasquatch, which I like very much. And we also have a book on Atlantis. And this book on Atlantis I found in a library when I lived in Seattle. And I contacted the publisher and I was able to get a special price. It actually has the transcription of an Atlantean scroll written by the scribe to the 3 Magi of Atlantis from 29,000 years ago.
Oh my God.
So a really powerful book. So I've probably sold more copies of that book than I've sold of my own books. But, the crystal skulls were an intricate part. So again, csc.crystalskullexplorers.com is our website, or if people want to send us an email, it's just crystalskullexplorers@gmail.com. Or they can just look up Crystal Skulls and Joshua Shapiro, and they'll find me in Google on the internet. So,
wow, Joshua, I cannot thank you enough. Joshua Shapiro, everybody, look this man up. And like I said, get out there, go to the seminars, go to the conventions, get the books. This guy is all over the place. If you just Google this guy, you're going to be reading for a while. Get comfortable, get you a comfy chair, because you're going to be there for a while. And what I'd like to do is once this is out here, again, I will make sure to link you to this. But and I do want to have you on because we barely scratched the surface. We've barely dented the soil. And I would definitely want to have you back on here. But I do want to tell everybody that's listening that we are coming to the end of the show. And as always, I want to thank you guys for tuning in. And it's been my honor to have you folks on here and to have our guest Joshua Shapiro on episode 53 of House of Asher. Go to the stevieasher.com page if you want to learn more about, myself and my books and the show and all that great stuff. You can also go there. Please don't forget our sponsors, Allers Oddities in Paducah, Kentucky, Dunk's Tires out of Princeton, Kentucky, and you guys, because without you, this would not be possible. But I want you guys to enjoy the rest of the day and enjoy all that the world's bringing you. But as the day grows short and the shadows grow long, check under your bed, check in your closet. You never know. There may be, you might find something mystical there. You might find something magical, but it doesn't always have to be something spooky. But, there's nothing wrong with having a little scare. So if you can enjoy a safe scare, do that. So until next time, love each other, love yourselves, and stay scared, everybody. Until next time.